eye on them, and you're exactly right. There is some second guessing going on, let's call it, about Holland and wanting to keep that playoff streak alive, and maybe they could have very well gone with the youth movement a little earlier than they did. To try to revamp the roster. Holland would of course get a lot of veterans, to plug some holes and some gaps and all that. But I don't think the man should be faulted. I think that the fans love to be in the playoffs, so the team loves to make the playoffs. And I think the naysayers who said, "Oh wow, they sacrificed a couple of years by maybe," forget that stuff. Okay, there's water under the bridge now. What you're doing now in Detroit is building a team and building for the success of the future, and hope to make the playoffs either this year or, if not this year, next season.
Yeah, I would never second guess Kenny Holland for doing it. I was glad that he got into the playoffs 25 years in a row. The only thing I would honestly second guess Ken Holland on right now is, why do you take the Edmonton job when you could have gone ahead and taken the Seattle job and built that organization from scratch? I'm kind of mind boggled at that one. I really am.
Well, did he know he was going to get the Seattle job for sure? We don't know that, Scott. What he did is he settled for the thing that was certain, and the certainty for him was, of course, the Edmonton job. So, I know what you're saying, and he's from the Vancouver area, and ideally it would have been great, almost as good as Steve Yzerman coming back to Detroit, matter of fact. But again, we don't know the inside there. We don't know, maybe Kenny just felt it was too good to pass off, too risky maybe, if he said no to Edmonton and then maybe Seattle sided with somebody else. Of course, we'll never know. We'll never know because it's not going to happen now.
Right. Well, it's speculation. Everybody's entitled to speculate in this business. Not only do we come up with a lot of facts, but what we also do is we do speculate, and that's what this is all about, because we're called talk radio. So let's go on to the team that also plays at the Little Caesars Arena, called the Detroit Pistons. I'm going to mention a few names to you, and tell me whether you think they'll be a factor this coming year for the Pistons. First of all, they recently signed Joe Johnson.
I'm Joe Johnson played in the Big Three tournament,
right?
And I think that he did very, very well. He was one of the best players in that tournament. So no, I think that's a decent pickup. They're adding some depth on the roster, and Joe's got some good skills, a good skill set to bring to the team. I like that. How about you? Do you like it?
Yeah, anytime you can add a shooter, let alone a proven one, I have no problem with it either. I was actually caught off guard by it, but why not? They need to put the ball in the hole. So I have no problem with it. Derrick Rose is an interesting addition. So where does Derrick Rose fit into the Pistons' plan this year? I think he's certainly an upgrade, and why not? He's been around the league for a while. He's a veteran.
Yeah, I think that's what Detroit is doing. They're loading the roster right now with veterans. The proof will be in the pudding, as they say. Johnson, going back to him, I think he was an NBA All-Star 7 times. And, of course, Derrick Rose, he's had a great career, although he's been hampered a little bit by injuries in the past. But I think it was a good pickup for Detroit. Again, the whole thing is, can all these players mesh together? Let's face it, the Big Three are Andre Drummond, Blake Griffin, and Reggie Jackson. So, the thing is you're trying to complement that roster, and let's not forget Luke Kennard, who's young, but he has a lot of ability and did well as he was, put into the starting lineup, part of last season. So I think Coach Dwayne Casey is what he's trying to do is, stack that front court a little bit, and get these guys. He's got Marquise Morris they picked up, right? Yeah, and then there's that Son Maker, who's a big fella, of course we know, and and a decent shooter. So I think the key for Detroit is what I thought they were really lacking, Scott, last year was an inside game.
Right.
Drummond is a great rebounder. Of course we know that, but these other guys were not doing the rebounding. Blake Griffin is not a good rebounder. He plays that outside game most of the time.
Right.
I think that for the Pistons to move up in the conference and get more wins, I really do think they got to try to strategize a little bit better with that inside game. Try to go to the hole, as they say, a little bit more often.
Yeah, it almost seems like the Detroit Pistons are adding a few former Milwaukee Bucks. You alluded to one with Thon Maker. Don't forget Tony Snell is on board. Whether that does anything for him or not is anybody's guess, but they're trying to be aggressive to make some kind of off-season move. So now you talked about Reggie Jackson, okay. I know they're at a crossroads with him. Do you think that Reggie Jackson has a future in Detroit, or do you think this is a make-or-break year for Reggie?
Yes, Todd, I don't think there's going to be a future for him. I really don't. I mean, he was healthy most of last year, which was good, and did put up some decent numbers. But I just got a feeling that, number one, the money he's probably going to command in his next contract, I don't think the Pistons are going to be willing to give it to him. I really, and of course they're hampered with this huge contract now for Blake, and Andre's got a huge contract, as you know. So. And I don't know. I mean, I think if they would have been if Reggie would have been more successful, and the Pistons would have been more successful, I would say there was a possibility of him staying. But at this point, my venture would be that they're gonna move away from him.
I actually wonder, George, that I know that the Pistons are keeping him. Obviously, this year they've got no way to move his salary anyhow. But when you look at his body of work in Detroit, outside of some of his injury issues, I don't know how much value he would really have on the open market, which, especially considering the fact that Stan Van Gundy overpaid the guy in the first place, and Detroit was stuck with all these salaries, which explains why Stan Van Gundy isn't even in the league anymore anyway. So, I don't even know what Reggie Jackson's value would be on the open market, to be honest with you, George.
Yeah, no, you bring up a good point, and for our listeners, they may recall, many of them, he was a former Oklahoma City player, around 2011, until the Pistons got him in 2015. So, I mean, he did have some decent numbers, of course, coming out of Boston College and that program there. But then, he didn't get a lot of action, as I recall, in his first year or so with Oklahoma City. Then he came on a little bit, but the Pistons right now. They've held his rights now and had him. They got him in a trade. I remember.
Right.
That three-way trade with Utah. I believe it was Utah.
Right.
But Jackson is. That's a good point, Scott. When you think about it that way, it's really what value does he have? Among those other NBA clubs, like you said.
Yeah, I think that his value will be overstated. Now, whether they'd want to retain him for a much lesser amount, I don't know. But to me, I judging by his body of work with the Pistons, they haven't won a playoff game in a while, let alone a series for a while. So, me personally, and again, I'm not a personnel guy, I would think that they would probably go ahead and move on from him and see if they can find a better player through the draft. Or, you don't know who's out there that's available. So, I would think that Reggie Jackson, his future would definitely be in doubt. So we have a few more minutes to go, George, so let's go on to the Detroit Tigers. The home portion of the schedule is over with now, and obviously they only have a few more games over the weekend. I believe it's with the White Sox. Ron Gardenhire, his 2 years under his belt. Did the Tigers accomplish anything in terms of player evaluation this year?
Well, I think so. I mean, they had a horrible home season, as we know, and you just mentioned that they wrapped things up today. I mean, Scott, how bad is it when Minnesota, after their celebration last night, puts out a minor league lineup? I mean, all due respect. I mean, I know a couple of guys are major leaguers. I don't mean it that way, but they put up all the scrubs today in a game after they were out partying last night, and Detroit still can't beat them at home.
Right.
They lose 10-4. It's just been a frustrating year for Tiger fans. You know that as well as anybody, and especially at home. Just the worst home record they've put up since Trammell's year, I believe, of 2003.
Right.
That being said, let's get to your question. Did they evaluate? Did they get any leads on any of these young players? I want to say they did. There's a few of them that stood out. Brandon Dixon had a good year. I liked what he did. Of course, Jacoby Jones was not a rookie, but he had a good year. Uh, they got some, another look at Joe Jimenez now in a new role as the closer. I'm still leery of that. After the trade of Shane Green, I don't think Jimenez is ready to step into that role yet. He certainly had his ups and downs this year. There's Harold Castro and Willie Castro, and the guy named Victor Reyes. So there's a lot of guys that, play pretty differently. There's this Lugo guy at second base.
Right.
He's had a pretty solid, albeit around 250, 255 or whatever his average is, but he's played solidly, I thought, for a rookie. Of course, Tyler Alexander. There have been a couple of guys in the bullpen, a couple of guys. What's his name? I can't think of his name. Come on, help me out. They lost the 16 games.
Oh, you're talking about
Spencer Turnbull.
Spencer. Okay.
Yeah, he showed some signs of life too. Spencer Turnbull, and so did Tyler Alexander, and of course Boyd had a pretty decent year. But to answer your question, I think they saw some signs, but I don't think these are the guys that are going to be necessarily here when things turn around. And we forgot the catcher, of course.
Jake Rogers.
Yeah, Jake.
Yeah.
You interviewed, I know.
Yeah, he has
Jake Rogers.
potential upside. I think he needs to get his offense in order, but from a defensive standpoint, they say he's good. Let me give you a couple of thoughts. Number one, I agree with you. I don't think Joe Jimenez is the closer of the future. He just makes me nervous. I think he has no command on his pitches at all. I don't care how hard you throw the baseball. If you can't throw it in the right spot, then that velocity doesn't mean anything. Number two,
Yep.
I think the one thing that will be interesting going into camp next year is whether Michael Fulmer is fully recovered from Tommy John surgery, to see whether he'll be a factor in that starting rotation.
That's a good point.
And then you also have the outfielder acquired. Was it Demerit from the Braves?
Yeah.
Could be interesting. And then the last player I want to mention before we wrap up the program is Christian Stewart. I think a lot more people really went ahead and thought that he would be more of a factor, and it sounds like, just because you hit the cover off the baseball in AAA and below, the major leagues is definitely a different animal, and Christian found out that this year.
Yeah, you're right. Christian is a disappointment, and of course we can't forget Candelario was a bit of a disappointment too this year. His power numbers really tanked this year, and you're absolutely right on when you mentioned about Christian Stewart. He could hit the ball, cover off the ball in the minors, but he could not go long range in Detroit here. The Tigers had one of the worst power stats of any teams in the year of the home run, as we saw with the Minnesota Twins hitting number 300 this year.
Right.
Unbelievable. The Tigers were right near the bottom as far as power and home runs go, and I was disappointed as you were. And of course, Miguel Cabrera is nothing like he was in the past.
Right.
His numbers again stunk this year. It's just sad to see him demise like he's been demising, with injuries and other things associated with his body, and a little bit overweight too. Even he admitted the other day he needs to lose some weight.
Yeah, a few other things I want to close on. Nicholas Castellanos wanted to be out of town in the worst way, and he ended up getting his exit papers to the Cubs, but unfortunately for the Chicago Cubs, they're not going to the postseason, and they ended the season horribly, losing quite a few games in a row, which paved the way for the Milwaukee Brewers to get in the playoffs. And if I had to vote for a Manager of the Year candidate, I would definitely give Craig Counsell my vote, because not only did he work through a lot of challenges with their pitching, losing Corey Knebel from the beginning, culminating with the end of Christian Yelich at the end, but the Milwaukee Brewers are a dangerous team going into the postseason. Who knows how far they'll get in the postseason? Time will be the determining factor, but Nick Castellanos, to me, will be a free agent. I'll be curious to see where he winds up anyways. And I also think that Joe Madden will be looking for a job as well. So.
Oh yeah, I agree. I agree with you. Joe's probably going to be out, and Nick, I know he would love to stay in Chicago. I think he really found Wrigley Field to his liking. My gosh, the numbers he put up there were quite substantial, but it's still, like you said, the bottom line is still not enough to get the Cubs into the playoffs.
Right.
They really had a bad last week and a half or so, they've been playing